Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellbite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. I hope you guys are all staying safe out there over this holiday season. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the importance of champion pools and why one-tricking is not maybe so great of an idea. Now, first and foremost, I think the biggest thing to sort of say about here is that this is actually based off of a Twitter trend. I saw a lot of people were posting their sort of champion pool in a sort of tier ranking list and saying champs, even though they don't play the role, and just kind of saying, this is what I play if I absolutely have to play that position, but it's not really what I do, that sort of a thing. So I thought it would be fun. And it was a good way of sort of thinking about which champions you play. I feel like there are a lot of times, especially doing it myself, where you kind of think, yeah, I play that champion, right? And then you go to actually fill out a spreadsheet or a list of champions you play and realize, no, I don't really play that champ. Or to sort of say, yeah, okay, I thought I didn't really play that champion, but now that I think about it, I would consider them to be a member of like my top lane champion pool. And I saw a lot of people who either had 1 or 2 champions per role, or who had like 6 or more champions in a role. And I think neither is really what you want to be looking at in League of Legends. And I feel like there is a sort of argument to be made here about finding a concrete champion pool and sort of sticking with it and playing specifically just those champions as opposed to trying to play everything or trying to only play one champ. And there is sort of a competitive advantage and reason for this. Now, to address the elephant in the room, I do think that one-tricking is not really the best thing in the world, especially in a game like League of Legends. It's often said that one-tricking is ideal, and if you're not sure what I mean by one-tricking, it means literally playing one champion to the exclusion of everything else. So not maining a champion, right? So if you're a Malphite main, for example, that means you probably play him in most of your games, but you're totally willing to swap off if you end up needing to play something else, or if something else is going to be more ideal, right? Like, that sort of being able to say, okay, I main that champion, but I'm not going to play him in every single game. A one trick is literally every single game, no matter what, doesn't matter what you're up against, doesn't matter what composition you are with, you are playing this champion in every single game. And while a lot of players say basically when you start playing the game, you only want to be playing the same champion in every game, and that's sort of what, because new players need help sort of learning the fundamental aspects of the game, things like last hitting, warding, pushing towers, team fighting. You don't want to have to be thinking about what your champion does as well. So playing one champion at the beginning of the game can be a very good way of just simplifying things and saying, all I'm going to focus on is learning sort of the map, the gameplay, a lot of other things about it. So while that's good for players who are literally just learning the game, one-tricking is detrimental to a long-term climb because of the numerous disadvantages it brings. First and foremost, of course, are your champ select woes. Your champion, especially if it's a champion that is contested, or a champion that's very popular, or a champion that is very behated, will very rarely be able to get through no problem. If your champ is popular, they're likely to be picked away or even banned before the game gets started. If your champion is someone that players don't like seeing, so if you are trying to be a Samira main, or sorry, I should say a Samira one-trick, well, she's probably going to be banned in almost every single game, even by your own team, because they just don't want the enemy team picking her, which can make it very difficult then to continue to one-trick on that particular character just because they're never available. It also makes you very susceptible to counterpicks, especially if your champion has very hard counterpicks. So, for example, playing a champion like Zed, there are some champions that will just completely shut you down, that will say, hey Zed, you don't get to play this game by virtue of the fact that I picked this character here. And that can sort of be a disadvantage then because, well, sure, while you won't always be up against someone who can pick a champion that just completely counters yours, when it does happen, you just kind of have to stop playing the game at that point because you already picked Zed, or you knew you were going to play Zed. And of course, sure, you can say, for example, oh, well, I'll just dodge if my champion is banned or if they counterpick me super hard. But at the end of the day, is that really what you want to be doing, is dodging out of multiple games, losing LP that could otherwise be totally avoided? Another thing to think about is that one-tricking can make certain games harder than they have to be. So, for example, if I know the enemy team is 5 80 carries or 5 attack damage stacking champions, I could just play Malphite, and at some point I will win because I will have so much armor and do so much damage that they can't stop me. But if I'm one-tricking, let's say Garen, well, I have to play Garen, and that makes the game so much harder than it has to be. And then if I just played a champion that is going to be really good against the enemy composition or really good for my own composition, right? So there's sort of a lot of disadvantages to one-tricking. Of course, there are advantages. You get very, very good at that specific champion. You know exactly how much damage you do. You know all the possible builds and counter builds. You know all the possible situations in which your champion can be strong, what kind of lane matchups feel like in every situation. There are advantages to it, but at the end of the day, I don't think there are enough advantages to warrant doing it. On the other end of the spectrum is the I play every champion syndrome. First and foremost, no you don't. There's no possible way you have a fundamental understanding of 150 champions in the game. No person like that exists. I have a very large champion pool. I skew a lot more towards I play more champions than only one champion. And even I wouldn't say I play every champion in the game. Heck, there are still, I think, a handful of champs that I have never played and may not even get to playing. So you don't play everything. And I think it's foolish to try to look at every champion in the game before choosing what champion you want to play in any given game, because you may not be able to pull that off, right? It might be a champion that you either haven't really played that much, or even if you played a game on them and did well, that doesn't mean that you fundamentally play the champion, and you're vulnerable to being outplayed because you don't understand the nuances and the details of every champion in your pool, right? Of every champion in the game, I should say. You don't get everything that that champion is capable of doing. You don't know their advantages, their disadvantages, why to pick them, what sort of matchups they're good into, what sort of matchups they're good with, that sort of a thing. So, and the other thing this sort of leads into is choosing a counterpick champion that you've never played before. So saying, for example, oh, well, I read on MobaFire or on op.gg that Teemo is a counter to Renekton, so I'm going to pick Teemo here, even though I've never played Teemo before in my life. And that's not what you want to do, because it may not go the way you want it to. Even if a champion has a very solid counterpick matchup into another one, you may not understand exactly why that champion is a counterpick and therefore not be able to execute on it properly. You may have a misconception about the champion going into it, so saying, well, I only ever see Malphite built AP, so I'm going to build AP Malphite, and I still counter the enemy team of 580 carries, right? And then you don't, because you're AP Malphite, and you can kind of get blown up. Or just the ability to execute precisely what your champion needs to do. You probably won't be able to do that if you've only played the champion one or two times, or even if you've never played them before. Even if this champion is supposed to be super 100% you win lane against the enemy champion, if you don't know how to play them, then it doesn't matter how good they are against that champion. You will probably still get bodied by someone who understands the champ and why it's strong. So, as sort of a mix of these two concepts, one tricking and playing every champion in the game, is having a distinct, concrete champion pool of, I would say the sweet spot is probably 4 to 5 champions, of saying those are specifically how many champs I am going to try and play in any particular situation. That sort of helps balance out the skill development you have of playing a single champion versus the champ select and counterpick advantages of playing potentially every single champion in the game. First and foremost, it shortens the time you need to think about picks. You sort of know, well, I'm going to play somebody who's in my pool, right? That's not really a thought I need to worry about. I don't really have to try to think through every single champion on the list. You sort of have the ability to say, well, you run down your pool and you can kind of say, well, my mid lane picks are, Xerath, Vel'Koz, but both of those are going to be bad into Assassin, Lissandra. Okay, cool. Yeah, that works out pretty well into an Assassin, and then pick up that instead. And in a similar fashion, it gives you options even if your main or several mains end up banned away. Even if your opponent bans out your first couple of picks, you probably will still have a champion or two afterwards to choose between. So you're never going to have the opportunity of your opponent banning out the one champion you play and saying, well, I guess I'm dodging this game. You can kind of go down your list and say, well, what else do I play that can actually be good in this situation? And it gives you options if you do end up being autofilled. So the ability to say, yeah, okay, I'm not really a support main, but I do have 2 or 3 champions I play in the support position, so I still have some degree of selection about what I would like to build and what I would like to play and what's going to be good with my team comp. And that's another sort of advantage you get as well, is the ability to say, hey, this champion is good with our particular team comp, or this champion is good against their team comp, so I can go for them as opposed to my sort of main. So even if you're, let's say, a Zed main, but you look at the enemy team and you realize, wow, they're all ability power champions, well, pick up Galio maybe if he's in your pool, because even if you want to play Zed, the sort of value you can get out of picking this other champion is significantly higher than maybe just blinding into the Zed and saying, well, I hope this ends up working out. Finally, the other advantage this brings is that because you're able to consistently play all the champions in your pool, you're able to develop on all of them, which makes each of them a threat rather than a sort of, well, I hope this works, counterpick sort of champion. If you're able to routinely play 5 champions, then sure, you're not going to be the absolute god tier master of this particular champion, but you will have the ability to kind of say, well, I have some flexibility on each of these guys. I can choose whichever one I need for the possible role, and it's not like I'm playing them for the first time. I do have some experience. I do have some degree of mastery. I may actually know how this matchup goes better on this champion than on who my quote-unquote main might be, and so it just makes you more flexible as a player, and it makes you more of a threat as a player for the enemy team, who, especially if you're playing in something like Clash, which is an organized setting, you become a much harder player for them to deal with because the enemy team might be saying, well, this guy plays 4 or 5 champions all about the same amount. We can't really ban him out unless we put every single ban we have on that guy, and even then, because of the way the ban rotation work, he still might be able to pick up a champion even if we ban out 3 of his picks beforehand. The other advantage it gives, of course, is looking at your team's composition and saying, well, we really, really need initiation, so even though I play a lot of Juggernauts, I do think our team needs a way to actually start a team fight, or our team is really good at team fighting. If you've picked up something like a Miss Fortune and a Vel'Koz as your carries, well, shoot, I'm going to play initiation that whole time because it's going to make my team so much stronger, and it's going to make me have a lot more value to my team because we can just start playing a front-to-back team fight composition no problem. So in general, that's why I feel like champion pools are going to be a much better idea for you than just playing a single champion or just not even trying to develop on a champion at all and just sort of playing whatever you have whims for. But those are kind of my thoughts on the whole subject. Let me know what you guys are thinking down in the comment section below, and let me know what your champion pools look like. I would love to hear what your guys are sort of picking up and playing in your own games, or if you have a champion pool at all. I'd love to hear what your sort of experience at this sort of thing is. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.